Do you remember the shocking case of a man who opened fire on an entire family during their son's funeral? Well, brace yourself. This one is even more chilling. On January 31, 2021, around 9 p.m., the Trelawney police received a distressing call about a shooting during a church service at the Agape Christian Fellowship Church in Falmouth, Trelawney, Jamaica. What they encountered when they arrived would haunt them forever. What should have been an ordinary Sunday morning, filled with prayer and fellowship, quickly morphed into a scene of pure terror. In a moment of unimaginable violence, a son stood in the sanctuary of his mother's church and opened fire, shooting her dead while the service played out live on Facebook for the world to see. The calm of the church, usually a place of solace, was shattered as panic set in. No one could have predicted that this peaceful gathering would end in bloodshed, much less by the hands of a son. What drove him to this devastating act? And how could something so horrifying unfold in a place so sacred? But before tragedy struck, let's rewind to 1969 to understand the moments leading up to that fateful day. This is the tragic life and death of Andrea Garwood.
I say no matter what them say, no matter what them do, I love it
Born on May 27, 1969 in Jamaica, Andrea Garwood was a woman who knew the value of hard work, family, and faith. Growing up in a small, close-knit community, she was surrounded by people who admired her for her generosity, her warm heart, and her strong, unwavering spirit. From a young age, Andrea exhibited a passion for life. She set goals and strived relentlessly to achieve them, always guided by her faith. Andrea's professional life was marked by dedication and commitment. After moving to Montego Bay, she found a home at the National Commercial Bank, where she worked for over 20 years. As the regional credit card manager, she was well respected by her colleagues and superiors. Her boss praised her for her exceptional work ethic, noting that she would never settle for mediocrity and was always a source of light in the office. Her energy, humor, and leadership left an indelible mark on everyone she worked with. Andrea's enthusiasm and compassion were infectious, drawing people to her from all walks of life. Her genuine kindness and warmth left a lasting impression, and before long, she stepped into a relationship that would change the course of her life. It was during this period of her life that Andrea met and fell deeply in love with her first husband. Though much of their life together remained private, there was an undeniable bond between them. Andrea often spoke of the quiet, meaningful moments they shared, the simple joys that came with companionship and partnership. This chapter of her life, though not heavily publicized, became foundational to who Andrea was. And then came the greatest joy of all, their son, Andre Williams. He was a constant reminder of the love they shared, and Andrea often spoke about how she named him after herself, Andre, a name that symbolized her deep connection to him. As a mother, she was devoted to Andre. From the day he was born, he became her world. Andrea often referred to him as her nice, clean pickney, a term of endearment that reflected her pride and deep affection for him. But as time passed, life took unexpected turns. Though she had found love and purpose, the winds of change were beginning to blow. Little did she know, this chapter of her life, which seemed so perfect at the time, would eventually give way to new challenges. The story of her first marriage would soon end, and she would continue down a path filled with unexpected twists. Despite her professional achievements and a fulfilling family life, Andrea still felt that something was missing. After her failed first marriage, she moved to the town of Falmouth in Trelawney Parish to build a fresh life. Little did she know this decision would end up costing her life. After moving, she became an active member of the Agape Christian Fellowship Church, where she quickly earned the admiration of the congregation. Known for her uplifting personality and generosity, Andrea contributed significantly to church activities, helping organize events and offering her support whenever needed. It wasn't long before someone would have their eyes on her. It was at the church that Andrea met Jeffrey Garwood, a tour bus operator with a kind spirit and a shared love of faith. Andrea had long since given up hope of finding someone who matched her desires, but Jeffrey proved to be everything she had been looking for. Their connection was immediate and deep. Just like Andrea, Jeffrey had a deep and unwavering devotion to God. His faith was an essential part of his life, guiding him through every challenge and blessing. It was this shared commitment to spirituality that initially drew him and Andrea together, creating an instant bond between them. But beyond their faith, Jeffrey understood the struggles of parenting too well. Jeffrey, 8 years and his senior, had 4 children of his own from a previous marriage. He knew the sleepless nights, the endless sacrifices, and the constant juggling that came with raising children. His experience gave him a unique empathy for Andrea, especially as a single mother navigating the complexities of life and love. Their connection grew stronger not only because of their faith, but because Jeffrey genuinely understood the challenges Andrea faced daily. They could share their stories of parenthood, support each other's hopes and dreams for their children, and exchange advice on how to manage the sometimes overwhelming demands of family life. Despite the challenges of blending families, Andrea embraced her new role as stepmother, finding joy in building a new life with Jeffrey and his children. In 2017, Andrea and Jeffrey were married, a union that symbolized the start of a new chapter for both of them. Together, they purchased a home in the prestigious Stonebrook Manor, a prestigious gated residential community located in Florence Hall, near Falmouth in Trelawney Parish, Jamaica, where they created a life together. Yet, despite the happiness of their blended family, Andrea still faced challenges in connecting with Jeffrey's older children. Though she tried her best to form bonds, the dynamics of a step-family can be difficult to navigate, especially when the children were already grown and had a close connection to their mother.
I say no matter what them say, no matter what them do, I'm a loving room, still go to.
However, just as Andrea began to feel comfortable in her new family, tragedy struck. On July 30, 2020, Jeffrey Garwood got ready to leave home, as he always does. He kissed his wife goodbye and set off for what was supposed to be just another ordinary day on the road. It was a routine that many would take for granted. He was a man of responsibility, doing his job and heading out for a day of work. But that simple goodbye would be the last one Andrea would ever hear. Jeffrey would be killed in a tragic motor vehicle accident caused by a car fleeing from the police in St. James. The collision was a devastating blow, not just to Andrea, but to everyone who knew Jeffrey. His untimely death shattered the sense of normalcy they had built together. Andrea was left struggling to comprehend how something so violent and senseless could take the life of the man she loved.
That began my journey of painful grief. Hot. Yes. Hot. And as a church sister of mine, she said it beautiful. She said, Andrea, you cannot explain grief to people. They have to experience it. And so for me, the experiencing of this grief, it comes with a lot of mixed emotions that I can't explain. But you notice that song, Gracefully Broken?
Yes.
I am intent on being gracefully broken.
Yet, Andrea pressed on, determined to stay strong and care for the family she had worked so hard to build. But wait, it gets weirder. After Jeffrey's sudden and tragic passing, Andrea was left to process not only the deep grief of losing her husband, but also the overwhelming aftermath of his death. When his will was read, it revealed that a significant portion of his property, including their cherished home, had been left to Andrea. Along with the property, there were also provisions for some of his sons, ensuring that their financial futures were taken care of. On the surface, Jeffrey's will seemed like a final act of love and protection, a gesture to safeguard his family. But it didn't take long for the situation to turn ugly. Not everyone was pleased with the terms of the will, especially some of Jeffrey's relatives who felt entitled to a piece of what they believed was theirs. The outrage was loud, public, and rapidly began to brew into something far darker. This wasn't just a family dispute. It quickly escalated into a bitter, high-stakes conflict that no one could have anticipated. The tension surrounding the estate started almost immediately after Jeffrey's funeral. Andrea found herself the target of disturbing and threatening messages, many of them coming from relatives of her late husband. These weren't just emotional outbursts, they were violent threats. They demanded that she sell the house and divide the proceeds. At first, Andrea tried to brush it off, but the threats soon became more chilling and direct. The situation spiraled further when Andrea was forced to request police protection just to attend her husband's funeral. She was being stalked and harassed, and the sense of danger that had once been confined to the background of her mind now felt all too real. Family members who had once been close were now her enemies, and she was left to navigate a web of fear, betrayal, and hostility. What should have been a time for mourning and remembrance quickly became a battleground. But despite the escalating danger, Andrea refused to back down. She was determined to honor Jeffrey's wishes and hold on to the life they had built together. Little did she know, this fierce resistance would only fuel the fire of the conflict, and it was only a matter of time before things took a more sinister turn. Despite the mounting pressure and fear that hung over her life, Andrea remained determined to carry on. She chose to face each day with resilience, trying her best to live as normal a life as possible. She continued going to her office, meeting with friends, and finding comfort in her faith. Every Sunday, she would attend church, seeking solace in her unwavering belief. For Andrea, these small routines were a lifeline, a way to maintain some semblance of normalcy amid the chaos. But here's the thing. In her quest to keep her life moving forward, she had unknowingly made herself a target. Her daily routine, once a source of stability, now became vulnerable. She was predictable, easy to track, easy to follow. Her predictability made her an easy target, and soon those who resented her would strike with deadly force. On the morning of January 31, 2021, Andrea attended a service at Agape Christian Fellowship Church, a place she had come to call home. The service that day was special because, in response to the pandemic, the church had been live streaming their Sunday services for members who could not attend in person. Andrea arrived, as usual, early to set up and participate. The peaceful worship session began, and Andrea, as always, was deeply immersed in the praise. She was in the company of friends and fellow church members, a community she loved dearly. But little did she know, her life was about to end in the most brutal and shocking way. Around 9 a.m., a man walked into the church, seemingly unremarkable at first glance. He was dressed oddly, with a hat and a makeshift mask of a handkerchief tied around his face. One senior church member noticed him, but thought little of it, deciding to confront him after the service. Unfortunately, this brief moment of hesitation would be one that would haunt him forever. As the service moved into the praise and worship segment, the man suddenly stood up, pulled out a firearm, and began shooting Andrea at close range. The congregation, which had been peacefully worshiping moments before, was thrown into chaos. The gunfire, though not captured on the live stream, was recorded in the background. The shots rang out, followed by terrified screams and a desperate rush to safety. The shooter fired several rounds, hitting Andrea in the upper body. She collapsed to the floor, her lifeless body covered in blood, as the shooter quickly fled the scene. The police were called immediately, and emergency services rushed to the scene. When officers arrived at the church, they found Andrea lying motionless on the floor, covered in gunshot wounds. Now, here's where it gets interesting.
We begin this evening with a story that has left members of a church in Trelawney in shock. A woman was dead this morning after man entered the church posing as a member of the congregation. The deceased was multiple times. Again, we must warn you that some of the images in this report may be disturbing to some viewers, so cautionary viewing is advised. Javon Keys reports.
As the shooter fled the scene, an off-duty officer who had been attending the service fired a gunshot into the air in an attempt to stop him. While the shot startled the gunman, it was not enough to stop his escape. He ran outside, jumped into a getaway car, and sped away from the church. But he would leave behind a crucial piece of evidence: his phone. The dropped phone would prove to be the key piece of evidence that would eventually lead the police to the culprit. As the investigation unfolded, the police worked tirelessly to piece together the events of that morning. The dropped phone gave them a significant lead, but the real breakthrough came when surveillance footage from a nearby street caught a glimpse of the white Toyota used as the getaway vehicle. The authorities quickly traced the phone to its owner, Leon Hines, a 23-year-old storekeeper with no prior criminal record. Leon had rented the getaway car used in the shooting, and he had been seen acting suspiciously near the crime scene shortly after Andrea was killed. However, Leon's role was not as the shooter, but as the getaway driver. While he wasn't the one to pull the trigger, his involvement was key in making the escape possible. The police began to dig deeper into Leon's background and his connection to the crime. They soon discovered that he had been recruited by Dwight Prince Bingham, the shooter, to serve as the driver for the murder. Dwight, a construction worker, was the one who fired the fatal shots that ended Andrea's life. The question now was, why did Dwight and Leon, seemingly ordinary individuals, become involved in such a violent crime? As the investigation progressed, shocking new details began to emerge. The authorities learned that the mastermind behind the entire plot was none other than Andrea's stepson, Javon Garwood. Javon, who had long been frustrated and bitter about being excluded from his father's will, had been seething with resentment toward Andrea. He was determined to claim the estate that he believed should have been his, and Andrea's inheritance stood in his way. In the wake of his father's death, Javon felt slighted and angry that his stepmother, Andrea, was the one to inherit the house and property. The bitter emotions that had been building up over time led him to hatch a plan to have Andrea killed so he could take what he believed was rightfully his. So he plotted a grim plan. Javon reached out to Dwight and Leon, enlisting them to carry out the murder. The plan was set in motion, and they were all drawn into a deadly conspiracy that would forever change their lives. Dwight Prince Bingham, who had been promised a share of the money for his involvement, was the one who carried out the act of violence. Leon Hines, the getaway driver, would take them away from the scene, unaware of the full extent of the bloodshed that had just occurred. After days of intense investigation, the police managed to apprehend Leon Hines and Dwight Prince Bingham. Leon was arrested first, and although he initially tried to downplay his involvement, he eventually cooperated with the authorities. His cooperation led to the arrest of Dwight Bingham. But the biggest shock came when the police arrested Javon Garwood, Andrea's own stepson. Javon had been living under the radar, but his role as the mastermind was clear. He had orchestrated the entire plot, driven by his resentment and anger. This revelation sent shockwaves through Andrea's family and the community. The thought that someone so close to her, someone she had loved and cared for, could orchestrate such a violent act was almost too much to bear. As the investigation continued, more details came to light. Javon had openly expressed his dissatisfaction with the terms of his father's will, and he had made no secret of his anger toward Andrea. His bitterness had festered over the years, and it eventually culminated in the senseless murder of his stepmother. But the arrests were just the beginning of a long legal battle. Leon Hines, Dwight Prince Bingham, and Javon Garwood were all taken into custody and charged with multiple crimes. Leon was charged with murder, illegal possession of a firearm, accessory before and after the fact, and conspiracy to murder. Dwight Bingham, the shooter, was charged with murder and illegal possession of a firearm. And Javon Garwood, the mastermind behind the plot, was charged with murder and conspiracy to murder. The three men were denied bail and were kept in custody as the investigation continued.
3 persons in custody and about to have a 4th in custody for this. We pretty much have this case solved at the moment.
The details of the case would shock the nation as it revealed the depth of the betrayal and the lengths to which Javon had gone to claim what he thought was rightfully his. As the investigation closed in on the perpetrators, the next phase of the journey began, the courtroom. Leon Hines, Dwight Prince Bingham, and Javon Garwood were all prepared to stand trial for their roles in the tragic death that needed to be unpacked. Leon Hines, initially charged with murder, illegal possession of a firearm, accessory before and after the fact, and conspiracy to murder, shocked everyone when he decided to cooperate with the authorities. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to a plea deal. Leon's testimony played a crucial role in cementing the charges against Dwight Bingham, the shooter, and Javon Garwood, the mastermind behind the plot. This revelation sent a shockwave through the courtroom, leading to the further unraveling of the conspiracy. Leon's confession tied Dwight directly to the murder and provided critical information about the role that Javon played. However, the drama would take another twist. In an unexpected turn of events, Dwight, who had initially agreed to testify against Javon Garwood, suddenly refused to cooperate with the prosecutors. His shift in stance left everyone stunned, especially the prosecution team, who had counted on Dwight's testimony to secure a conviction against Andrea's stepson. The shock did not end there. Dwight, in a chilling move, refused to speak on the details of the murder and denied his involvement in the plot to kill Andrea. His refusal to testify against Javon threw a wrench in the case, leaving the prosecutors without the key evidence they needed to convict Andrea's stepson. However, Dwight did take responsibility for the murder during his own court appearance, admitting to firing the fatal shots that ended Andrea's life. The court quickly sentenced him to 42 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This sentencing was a bitter reminder of the senselessness of the crime, and although Dwight had confessed to the murder, the unanswered questions about Javon's full involvement remained. The trial took a final, devastating turn for Andrea's family when Javon Garwood was acquitted of all charges due to insufficient evidence. Despite the mountain of circumstantial evidence and the confessions of both Dwight and Leon, the jury could not conclusively prove Javon's direct involvement in the murder. Chief Justice Brian Sykes directed the jury to return a not guilty verdict, citing that there was no direct evidence linking Javon to the crime. No voice notes, no direct messages, or any clear financial transactions could be traced back to him. The defense argued that there was no concrete proof of Javon's role, and without Dwight's cooperation, the prosecution had no choice but to drop the charges against him. This verdict left Andrea's family reeling. Andre Williams, Andrea's son, was particularly devastated. He hoped for justice, but instead he found himself facing the bitter reality of an acquittal. He left the courtroom emotionally drained, unable to comprehend how his mother's life could be taken so senselessly, and how the mastermind behind her death was allowed to walk free. The impact of Andrea Lowe Garwood's death was felt deeply by her son, her family, and her community. As the family tried to make sense of the events that led to her murder, they also struggled with the aftermath of the trial.
The community of Falmouth, which had once been peaceful and united, was now grappling with a loss that hit too close to home. The thought that such a heinous crime could take place in their small, close-knit town was difficult for many to process. And to make matters worse, the justice system, which was expected to bring closure, had failed them in the case of Javon Garwood. This sense of betrayal was compounded by the accusations and voice notes that surfaced during the trial, claiming that Andrea was somehow a wicked woman. These accusations, spread by certain family members, painted a portrait of Andrea that contradicted everything the people who knew her best had ever experienced. However, many stood by Andrea's memory, fighting back against the false accusations and reminding the world of who she truly was: a loving mother, a devoted wife, and a respected member of the community. Despite the emotional toll of her death, those who knew Andrea fought to keep her legacy alive, celebrating her life and the impact she had on those around her. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.